It's that time of year again. Christmas came and went, New Year's is on the horizon, and everyone is trying to figure out which resolution they're going to not stick with this time. But before that, take a journey with me back through the past year at some of the best and brightest the gaming industry had to offer. As my name is Oversoul, this is Oversoul Gaming, and this is my top 10 games of 2022. Please note, this list will not contain any releases from December, as they will be eligible for next year's list. Enjoy. Not that long ago, in the galaxy in which you currently reside, the best LEGO game to date was released. Covering all 9 numbered movies in the Star Wars franchise, LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is truly one of the most innovative games in the LEGO repertoire thus far. Compared to previous LEGO games, the camera and controls are much tighter this time around, with something more akin to a over-the-shoulder third-person perspective versus the zoomed-out camera of previous games. The combat feels fluid and satisfying, and the game even adds a little cover shooting to simulate a level of strategy. When controlling a character with a blaster, you can now hide behind walls and cover and even rebuild cover that's been destroyed. But seeing as this is a LEGO game and you cannot get a true game over, not to mention that the stormtroopers are authentically inaccurate, this feature tends to shine its brightest in boss battles mainly. Visually, this game is absolutely stunning. A lot of work has gone into the textures and character models. Everything feels very high fidelity, and familiar set pieces from the movies are absolutely breathtaking. Although most things in the world are made from LEGO, a lot of the environment they reside in looks almost real, adding a sort of visual juxtaposition that somehow just works. In each episode, you utilize different planets such as Hoth or Tatooine as world hubs, and from there you can either follow the guideline marker to the next story quest, or there are an abundance of NPCs that could use your help and hidden collectibles and secrets for you to find. All the cutscenes and characters are fully voice acted, and it's pretty much a one-to-one recreation of the movies with LEGO nonsense thrown in. Oftentimes characters will be having serious conversations in the foreground as some Looney Tunes craziness is happening in the background. It's absurd and I love it.
You guys are the best! I never thought I'd make it to retirement, but here I am!
This game has vehicle sections, involved puzzles, lightsaber duels, and even some surprise moments where the game switches genres a little. Child or adult, if you are a Star Wars fan and enjoy the LEGO games, it doesn't get much better than this. I can only hope that they end up releasing DLC eventually that covers the stories of other notable entries in the Star Wars franchise.
So, who's in charge?
Oh, I've barely begun, Your Honor. You don't seem to understand. I was born with the devil in me. I could not help the fact that I was a murderer any more than a poet can help the inspiration to sing.
The Curator is back with another tale to tell in Supermassive's 4th and final entry in Season 1 of the Dark Pictures anthology, The Devil in Me. Based on the real-life serial killer H.H. Holmes, this game follows a documentary film crew who just so happened to be doing a documentary about H.H. Holmes. A history buff catches wind of their work and invites them to his Holmes-inspired murder castle, a replica of the World's Fair Hotel from the late 1800s. Once they get there, however, it doesn't take long for things to take a turn for the worse. Separated from each other and being hunted by a serial killer, our protagonists must now face moving walls, doors that lead nowhere, creepy mannequins, and booby traps aplenty, if they want to escape this island and survive the night. This has actually been my favorite entry in the Dark Pictures anthology so far, because not only does it scratch my favorite horror genre itch based around traps and puzzles, but it also does a much better job than its predecessors at character development. There will be many times in this game where you have to make decisions that seem almost impossible, like no matter what you do, someone is going to die, and without prior knowledge of how to survive these situations, it's very likely that you will not get through a first playthrough without losing someone. Although the game does not bring to the table the same level of improvements as House of Ashes did to the franchise, it does maintain the difficulty level option and adds accessibility options for QuickTime events. What The Devil in Me does add, however, is the ability to jump and climb as well as an inventory system. But the jumping and climbing only happen at predetermined spots, and the inventory system is limited to 4 items that can only be used at specific moments. One of the most standout things about this game would be its atmosphere and visuals. Every character you play as has their own light source to help them see in the dark, and these light sources range between a camera flash, a lighter, a flashlight, and so on, each one presenting a different feeling and atmosphere to the overall mood of the hotel. Although I still think House of Ashes is an objectively better game and brought more to the table for the franchise, The Devil in Me is my personal favorite so far, and I think it was a great finale to the first season of the Dark Pictures anthology.
But that doesn't explain why he's ditched out on us.
He had to go back to establish an alibi.
What are you...
You know, so when our bodies wash up on the other side of the lake, he has plausible deniability.
Oh, God, Jamie.
Can you stop trying to make this worse?
You're not helping.
Okay, fine. Just don't come crying to me if you end up dead.
What is wrong with you?
I'm just saying.
It's hard to pinpoint exactly what Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origins is. Is it a remake? Is it a prequel? Is it a standalone story? Is it all of the above? Possibly. What I can say is that it's the first Final Fantasy game to be a Souls-like. But don't let that discourage you from giving it a chance if you're not into the type of challenge that Soulsborne games bring, because this game is Final Fantasy first and foremost. The story is essentially a retelling of the very first Final Fantasy game. 4 Warriors of Light have beef with Chaos, and they will not rest until he's put down. Each warrior already has their crystal, but something is wrong. The crystals are all dark, and in order to restore their light, the warriors are going to have to travel to 4 different temples, and thus the journey begins. For the most part, it's pretty much beat for beat the same as the original Final Fantasy, but there are some changes. For those who played the original, you will be familiar with areas like Cornelia Castle and the Chaos Shrine, and characters like Princess Sarah and Garland. The King of Dark Elves even makes a return, and he's gone through one hell of a glow-up. As previously mentioned, the gameplay is akin to that of a Soulsborne game with emphasis on blocking and dodging, but with Final Fantasy aspects thrown in. Your weapons, armor, and abilities are all based off your current job class, such as Warrior, Thief, Mage, etc. Much like other Final Fantasy games, job classes can be upgraded to higher levels and eventually promoted into new and better jobs, allowing access to better abilities and equipment. There's a skill tree where you can level up the abilities for each job class, and your main character can have 2 jobs equipped and switch between them on the fly. And if you want to share in this experience, the game also has online co-op. Although this may be a bit of a departure from the usual Final Fantasy fanfare, it is a rather unique and interesting take on the franchise that Final Fantasy and Soulsborne fans can both appreciate.
You know what's about you and we'll be fine.
My name is Zoe Walker. Not so long ago, I wanted to be a journalist. Now, I just want to hold my breath and sink. Not because I want to black out, but for the calm that comes beforehand. When thoughts die and memories drown. 90 seconds. That's about how long it takes for me. And suddenly, it's like none of it ever happened.
A surprise sleeper hit this year, As Dusk Falls is an Xbox exclusive narrative-driven game where two families, one running from their problems, the other running from the law, have an unfortunate meeting with each other at a hotel in the middle of the desert. Next thing you know, one family's holding the other hostage, the cops show up, and things get out of control. The story and tone thereof plays out in a way that I would consider similar to that of a Tarantino movie. It's split into two different acts, each consisting of 3 chapters. The first act focuses on the hostage situation at the hotel, and the second act jumps forward in time and focuses on the trauma and aftermath. During the game, you will be making choices that change the narrative and performing QTEs to get out of hectic situations. Much like Detroit Become Human, this game also has a decision chart it shows you between every chapter, showing you the decisions you made and what they led to and how many other possible paths there were that you could have gone down. The game has a very unique art style as well. It appears to be almost hand-drawn. Sometimes backgrounds, vehicles, and other things move in real time, but the characters themselves move in still motion. It sets an interesting contrast in some scenes that I actually appreciated, but I can understand how this would be a bit jarring for some people. But I would implore you to give it a try anyways. The game deals with some rather heavy and thought-provoking subject material, and there's a lot to unpack. It's free on Game Pass, so what do you have to lose?
Jay, I won't lie. Seeing you isn't easy. Your family killed a lot of people. I've been afraid of this moment for a very long time. But you also looked out for me that night. I can't pretend I don't remember that too.
How can you be so forgiving?
Because if I let myself hate you, then I'm lost.
Hey there. So, you're one of us, aren't you? Mind if I ask you a few questions? And I guess you're like the other runaway teens, trying to flee Petria. It's really dangerous to cross the border. You have to be careful with the people you meet on the way, believe me.
Another game on my list that falls under a genre I normally wouldn't play, Road 96 is a procedurally generated roguelike where you play as a random teenager in a dystopian 1996 trying to escape from America into Canada. Every time you start a new episode, what part of the map you start in, the characters you meet along the way, and the choices that could lead to your escape, capture, or death are all different. On the surface, the game plays like your typical choice-based narrative-focused game, but there is a heavy survival element that is built into the core. The game keeps track of 2 very important things as you play: energy and money. Your energy is determined by factors like sleep, food, and distance traveled. Traveling takes energy, and food and sleep replenish it, but if you let your energy run too low, then bad things can happen. The game will often present you with morally complicated and sometimes challenging situations that there isn't always a clear way out of. If you die or get arrested before making it to the border, then you start over as a new teenager in a different area of the map, but no 2 playthroughs are exactly the same. On my first playthrough of the game, I started off hitchhiking in a semi-truck, then I stayed the night in a trailer park, befriended a hippie girl, stole some money to survive, met a tech geek at a restaurant, helped him steal back something the manager stole from him, almost got caught, walked a few miles, purposely sabotaged a Republican political rally, and used some of my stolen money to hail a taxi, at which point I made it about 300 miles from Canada, and then pissed off the cab driver by snooping through his personal belongings and finding something incriminating, at which point he shot me dead to keep his secret. And my experience was just one of many possibilities. What's more is that the story moves forward in time regardless of whether your current teenager makes it to the border or not, so when you start playing as another one, a couple days will have gone by. As such, you will end up meeting familiar faces as a different character, and it is ultimately through several playthroughs that you get the full story of each of these characters and what's going on with them. Until you reach Election Day and see what the great culmination is of all the combined choices that you've made across multiple playthroughs. Even if you're not a fan of roguelikes, I feel like this game has a certain appeal to it that differentiates it from your traditional roguelike. It's more of a procedurally generated, narrative-driven adventure survival game. I found the story and the overall setup in general to be very engaging. I challenge my viewers to play it and see how many times they can successfully cross the border.
Freedom. Nothing is more important, but there are many others in Petria still looking for it. and their journeys have only just begun.
The little pink puffball is back in what can only be described as the Super Mario Odyssey of Kirby games. Kirby and the Waddle Dees get sucked into a different world by a group called the Beast Gang. There, Kirby makes a new friend named Elfalin, and together they travel from area to area, taking down the Beast Gang one boss at a time. This game is an absolute must-have for anyone who is a fan of 3D platformer collectathons. If you have any love for Super Mario Odyssey, this game checks that same box. In usual Kirby fashion, you can steal powers from different characters that allow you to have different weapons or elemental abilities, and eventually, if you collect enough stars and do enough side quests, you can upgrade these abilities to make them even stronger. But that's not all. The true gimmick of this game is the mouthful feature. At certain points in the game, Kirby can actually stretch his mouth to grotesque proportions and put it over an inanimate object to essentially become that object for a period of time. This can be used to traverse certain terrain or solve certain puzzles or even find certain hidden collectibles. Do not let the cutesy aesthetic of this game fool you, however. It can be challenging, especially the boss battles. Every level you visit has a set amount of Waddle Dees that you can save, and some of them are very well hidden and others are right in your path. Also, back at your home base, the more you collect, the more things you unlock. Eventually there's a restaurant, a combat arena, and more. Overall, this game is some of the most pure classic Nintendo fun I've had in a while. It scratches that nostalgic itch for old school while simultaneously bringing something new to the table. Originally intended to be The Evil Within 3, this game is an underrated gem in my opinion. Smack dab in the heart of Shibuya, Tokyo, a paranormal fog has moved in, and with it comes creatures of the dark. When a man on the way to the hospital to visit his sister is consumed by the darkness, the ghost of a dead detective, who's been chasing the guy behind this, seizes an opportunity. Possessing and thus saving our protagonist, he is bound to the ghost, and together they must work to save Tokyo. In the very beginning stages, this feels a lot like a full-on horror game. You are in an abandoned hospital with cramped corridors, faded lighting, and horrible abominations roaming the halls. But once you leave the hospital, it becomes an open-world adventure game with ghosts as you get free roam of Tokyo. Going from one mission to the next, you will utilize the abilities of your ghost companion to harness the elements and fight back against the creatures. Wind weaving, fire weaving, water weaving, Hugo weaving, you have an Avatar-esque arsenal at your literal fingertips. The monsters themselves are creatively presented as manifestations of the unresolved trauma of humanity. The umbrella-holding faceless creatures represent the mundanity of everyday life and how office jobs can make you feel depleted of a soul. The headless schoolgirls are representative of the feminine struggle in a misogynistic society. There are plenty more, but I don't want to spoil them for you. Best if you discover it for yourself. Not all the spirits are malevolent, however. There are also some yokai running around, and most of them are actually tied to side quests that you can do. And the flying ones can be used to tether yourself to the tops of buildings. But one in particular, a Nikomata, is a cat that runs a bodega if you find yourself in need of items. The best part about this is that it's all based on actual Japanese folklore. As you travel from quest to quest and explore the open world map, you must also be on the lookout for the souls of the citizens that have been killed by this fog. Sometimes they are being guarded by enemies, other times they are in areas that you can't get to until you have the correct ability in typical Metroidvania fashion. But if you manage to find all of them, you can unlock the true ending. Overall, this game did not get enough attention this year in my opinion, and I'm here to fix that. If you like what you saw from this footage, then definitely give it a go. It deserves the support. Stray takes place in a post-apocalyptic cyber-neon world where humans have wiped themselves out with mutated bacteria, and the world has been left to their robot companions, who have made the best attempt they can to try and preserve the memory of humanity. Enter your character, a cat. On what was supposed to be an otherwise uneventful exploration, the poor feline is separated from his family. But thankfully he comes across a little robot companion who helps him navigate this new world and all of its dangers. Now it's just a matter of making it to the giant tower in the distance where there is hopefully a failsafe to destroy the bacteria and a way for the cat to get back home. In this game you will spend a lot of time running and climbing because you are a cat. Verticality is a huge aspect of this game, as you will often find yourself climbing up, and up some more. The main focus of the game will be mostly on mild puzzle solving in order to move forward. There are times where the game is linear, and there are times where it opens up a little bit and you get free roam to explore certain areas. There's not really any combat in this game outside of one level. Most of the time you will find yourself running from and outmaneuvering the bacteria monsters. Outside of all that though, it just wouldn't be a cat game if it didn't focus on cat stuff. Besides questing to save what's left of the world, you can also do typical cat things like scratch on trees and carpets, take a nice long nap, stick your head in a paper bag and get confused, or just meow to your heart's content. This is definitely a high recommendation for anyone who is a cat lover, but be forewarned that the game can be a tad stressful and it's not all sunshine and rainbows. This is a dark game with a dark subject matter. It just happens to feature an adorable cat. Amicia and Hugo are back in another dark fantasy adventure. After the events of the first game, the macula continues to spread through Hugo's body as the family travels to distant lands, seeking out the help and advice of the Order of the Alchemists. Meanwhile, Hugo's been having a dream about an island and believes that that is where he will find the cure for his disease. After his first session with an alchemist doctor results in a seizure, Hugo destroys an entire city with a literal tsunami of rats, and from that point it becomes a race against time to find a cure before it's too late for him and everyone else around him. Requiem makes major improvements over its predecessor in terms of gameplay and story. The first game was almost entirely stealth-focused and had an almost grid-linear feel to it where the very act of progression was in and of itself a puzzle. That feeling is not completely absent in this sequel, but everything has been opened up into a more wide linear, and outside of scripted sections, there's not as heavy of a focus on stealth. Amicia now has the ability to fight back. Although she can't go toe-to-toe with a trained guard, she can at the very least stun them with her sling long enough for her to get away, or deliver a killing blow with her newly acquired crossbow. At the same time, enemy AI has been improved, and once they realize you are in the area, they will start searching for you relentlessly, working together to flank you and ultimately just make your day harder. Alchemy is also back and bigger and better than ever, with new abilities and a more streamlined inventory system that's easier to access on the fly. On that note, how you choose to handle each encounter will also passively upgrade your stealth, aggression, or alchemy. Much like the first game, you will eventually find traveling companions, but in this game each of them is representative of a different fighting style. The world of this game is also much more expanded. You will find yourself often traveling through very busy cities full of people, music, and life in general. A huge departure from the first game. But regardless of all the fun and music, there are moments of this game that get very dark and emotional, and I was not prepared.
I don't know what's happening to me, Lucas. I feel my mind going.
Yes, because this world hurts. And it keeps hurting. And you want to hurt it back. But it's a fight you cannot win, Amicia. You are not them. You are a Darun.
So before we get to my game of the year, if you haven't figured it out yet, it's God of War Ragnarok. And although I have gone out of my way to avoid spoilers and used clever editing to censor some things, I understand that some people still like to go on media blackout for these types of games. So I'm putting this warning in here now. If you don't want to see anything about this game, this is the moment to leave the video. That being said, there is one gameplay aspect I will have to talk about that might be considered a minor spoiler to some people, but I will give you a fair warning before I bring it up. With all that in mind, if you're ready, let's get to it.
Hungry? What's next?
Home.
Taking place months after the first game, Kratos and Atreus are doing their best to survive the Fimbulwinter that they caused, as well as sneak attacks from a still distraught Freya seeking revenge for the death of Baldur. But when Thor shows up, as Atreus predicted in his dream, things take a real sharp turn. Home is no longer safe, and another adventure begins. As far as the story goes, that's about as much as I can say without spoiling anything. There are many twists and turns, some of the best character development I've ever seen in a video game, and absolutely breathtaking set pieces. Some of the places you visit and some of the characters you meet had me grinning from ear to ear. Once again, the acting is absolutely phenomenal, and the delivery of certain lines, especially from Christopher Judge as Kratos, just sent a chill down my spine.
Death can have me when it earns me. Forgiveness can be powerful, even for the unworthy. I have seen enough war to know the cost. Intent does not matter. Only consequences.
As far as the combat goes, it's pretty much the same as the first game with a few improvements that I can't get into because of spoilers, but what I can tell you is that the Blades of Chaos carry over from the first game and are available right from the get-go. You will once again have to utilize the elements of your blades and axe to exploit enemy weaknesses, even more so than before. Puzzles are a little more complicated than before, but still mostly straightforward, and if you find yourself getting stuck, the other characters will tell you what to do anyways. The game is practically flawless, but if I had to complain about anything, it would be that sometimes the pacing is a little off and the climax feels a bit rushed, but everything that comes after that makes it worth it. Now here's the part I warned you about where I have to get into mild spoiler territory. In this game, there are some moments where you play as Atreus. These are the moments where the game really stood out for me. Although he's not as strong as Kratos, he is much faster, and his version of Spartan Rage is a much better ability that I will not spoil. He can use his bow as a full-on melee weapon, or utilize his arrows as need be. He knows magic now, and he can use that to his advantage. He is an overall much better, more ethical, and well-developed character than he was in the previous game. The shifting character perspectives in this game is ultimately what leads to what I would consider some of the best character development in all of video gaming. Also, the areas that you visit when playing as Atreus, or rather Loki, are absolutely breathtaking and some of the most fun parts of the game overall. I'm hoping for an eventual third game in the reboot franchise, but even if they don't make one, I am completely satisfied with how this one wrapped things up.
Until you learn control, we will take no unnecessary risks.
Inaction is also a risk. You taught me that. Stop thinking like a father for a moment and start thinking like a general.
No!
And there you have it! That's my list. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, do me a favor and click that like button because it helps with the algorithms, and leave me a comment down below letting me know what your favorite games of this year were. If you participated in the Guess My Top 10 contest, the winners will be announced 2 days after this video was uploaded on Friday, December 30th, so please stay tuned. And as always, I will catch you possibly at another day, definitely at another time, and likely in another video. Okay, goodbye!